So this is what you need to know about Canon. Canon, as a manufacturer of cameras and lenses, has been taking a rough couple of days, months, and years here online. You know, they haven't been making products that have been matching up with the competition, and their slow release cycle has been really unfortunate because it hasn't been allowing a lot of their products that could be really interesting if they iterated enough to get to that point where they could be interesting because they haven't iterated enough. And finally, they're chock full of frustrating software limitations that don't need to be there. And functionally that makes most of their cameras, most of their updates, be it lenses or bodies, really uninteresting, really unsatisfying as a member of the photographic community. Canon's an easy brand to bash on in this space. They're not doing a lot of things that, in my opinion, they should do. Embracing mirrorless, and I think they could do that by making much better lenses for their mirrorless cameras they already have, and also, you know, a number of other things that we can get into at a later time. I think not putting on-sensor phase detect autofocus points on sensor, not to be redundant, but seriously, that's a big thing. Huge PDAF spreads. I know DPAF is supposed to be good, but it's not going to ever be as good as dedicated PDAF points when you're subject tracking. Every camera I've seen out of Canon, the implementation of DPAF fails at tracking. It just does. DPAF fails at tracking. PDAF would not. I think Canon really should have, in conjunction with OSPDAF points, face detect. I think they very easily could put face detect through an optical viewfinder. That would be a little bit challenging, sure, but I think it's possible. They could be putting 4K mechanical IBIS in their cameras, and they just aren't. Canon's easy to mock, right? It's easy to see the detracting points of Canon. Their competitors' devices, both lenses and bodies, compare very well, if not way favorably, on paper and in the real world. These days, with the 1-inch type sensors, Micro Four Thirds, APS-C, and other full-frame models from other manufacturers looking so good on paper and in the real world both, with cameras like the A9, the RX10 Mark IV, the A7R III, the XE3 from Fuji, the XT2, the X Pro 2, the G9, the GH5 from Panasonic, G85 as well, or GX85 I guess, depending on where you live, all garnering so much mind space and attention because of their stunning image quality, performance, everything about them, feature set, all of which push back very hard, handling included, all of which push back very hard at what traditional DSLR manufacturers like Canon have been kind of grinding away at for years, making it seem like Canon is a bit in the doldrums. From a brand equity perspective, Canon, certainly, at least here online, is in the doldrums. Doldrums, for those of you who don't know, is a nautical term, and it means, back in the days, rather, when all boats were sailing boats, doldrums was when you sailed into a point at which the sea and the winds both didn't move. And so you could be stranded on the sea for a very long amount of time. You could starve in the middle of the ocean with fish and water all around you just because it was salt water and you didn't have a fishing rod type of thing. And eventually a breeze would blow through and carry you out of the doldrums, hopefully. The doldrums refer to when all motion, be it sea or wind, has died out completely, without a puff of wind, a swell of sea, for days on end. When one is on the sea sailing with a boat that is powered by wind with sails, the doldrums can be unendurably long, hot, unsafe as food and water run out. And when death on the high seas starts to look more of a whimper than a romantic adventure. Canon isn't a sailing boat. They're a boat with a motor attached to it. But Canon isn't a sailing boat. Canon is a boat with a motor attached to it. Before we get any further, I just want to clarify, I don't think I could buy another Canon, especially not a DSLR. I am in love with mirrorless. I think mirrorless is the greatest thing to hit the photographic community since the 5D Mark II with its video revolution for DSLRs. I adore the size, weight, cost to value proposition. I love everything about mirrorless. I've put a couple videos out that are actually comparisons of several cameras at a time. My biases have led me to conclude that it's not the Canon cameras that win those comparisons. I frequently get asked in the comment section of those videos, what camera should I buy for this application? Should I buy camera X or should I buy a camera Y? Frequently, I'm actually directing people in the direction of a Canon. I had a lovely chat with a gal the other day talking about she wanted to get a relation of hers, a cheap little camera. With the holidays and all the sales and stuff coming up, she was looking at it closely, and I pointed her in the direction of a Canon. See, just because I don't think that Canon makes many cameras or lenses that are adequate value propositions for those of us here in the photographic community and the internet doesn't mean that I think that there are some users for whom the value propositions of Canon's devices are very good. I was talking to a guy the other day in one of the comment sections of one of my videos about what camera he should get. He wanted to have better Instagram photos as well as do event and music video. G85, GX85, whatever, or 80D, he asked me. I, in my opinion, couldn't have directed him any other direction than the 80D. Maybe the 77D because of the electronic image stabilization, just for safety. But here's why, because if he's serious about this video production stuff, for the rest of his career, he's probably gonna want to have EF lenses. He's either going to use or be able to adapt EF mount lenses to any video camera for the entirety of the rest of his career. Canon cinema cameras are dominant in a ton of markets despite not having the value for dollar proposition that cameras from Panasonic and Sony have. Hell, even Red cameras come with an EF mount, if you buy it extra. More importantly, perhaps, video on the whole is done predominantly with APS-C sized or Super 35 sized sensors, not with Micro Four Thirds sensors. A great example of that is Panasonic's EVA-1, which is an APS-C or Super 35 sized sensor with an EF mount, made by Panasonic. Gal I was talking to the other day, she wanted something that was a very high value proposition for the cost. I had to recommend the EOS M100 because although it's a bit more expensive and has one fewer lens kit than the T6 that comes with the 18 to 55 and 75 to 300, EOS M100 only comes with the 15 to 45. It's got Canon's best sensor to date, best APS-C sensor to date. The same sensors is in the 80D. It's got DPAF. It's got great entry-level features and functionality, even as this extends to the navigation of the menus. Turns out that I've actually, in the last 15 days, recommended more Canon cameras than I have in the last 15 months. That got me thinking, what is Canon's real brand identity? What is their real value proposition? What is their equity offering? What is their reputation, their identity? Such that I could say, this is not for me, but feel more than comfortable recommending it for someone else. Come with me on a little journey, if you will. Canon's cameras, all of them, have roughly the same ergonomics. Basically, what that is supposed to mean is that you can pick up any Canon camera, and as long as you know how to use a Canon camera, you'll be able to navigate and operate it as if it were the one that you are most comfortable with. Hopefully you'll get the next couple of references. My 6D has a rear dial. My 6D has a big, knurled, grippy dial. It's also very plasticky on the back of it. Right next to the LCD, and it makes a fairly unpleasant sound when you rotate it really quickly, like it's breaking. That dial, which is right outside of the D-pad, is what controls aperture by default of whatever lens you've stuck onto the body. I've used that camera in my other Canon bodies enough to the point that when I want to change my aperture, I don't have to count the clicks. I don't have to think about it. I just kind of rotate the dial, and it's just about always exactly where I want it to end up. You know, sometimes though I do wish that I could just keep rotating it backwards and it would end up turning an f1.8 lens into an f1.2, but sadly that's not a possibility. I'm not sure if that could be called muscle memory or something else. Imagining myself using that dial is the way that I do equivalence calculations when I'm making a video that has a conversation about equivalence in it. I don't open a depth of field calculator or anything like that, I just visualize myself using that dial. Now this is a deeply unscientific and highly subjective thing to extrapolate from these three stories that I've told you here. This is what I'm thinking. If when I'm not holding a camera physically in my hands, when I'm predominantly using another camera, my Alpha 6300 that's filming right now, when I'm thinking about how exposure would work, I'm thinking about my Canon camera. When I'm recommending a camera to someone with little to no knowledge of themselves of photography, not to disparage anyone, we've all been there with photography, and we're all there with myriad other domains of knowledge, and I'm going straight to a Canon camera, what does that say? I think that what this says is that ever how much you and I take issue with the way that Canon elects to run their business, they're still making great devices, they're still occupying mind space. That Canon is still leading for a reason. For better or for worse, when I recently watched PGN and Sarah Seal's review of the new-ish 85 f1.4L IS, I could not take my mind off thinking what I could do with that lens. Part of the problem with that is that 85 is one of my favorite focal lengths. Lenses like the 85 f1.4L IS, the 16 to 35 f2.8 L2, I like the shape of that one better than the Mark III. 70 to 200 f2.8 L2, 50 f1.2 L, the 24 to 105 f4L IS. These lenses don't exist for me as Canon only. When I'm looking at Sigma lenses for my Alpha 6300, in the back of my mind I'm thinking of Canon options. When I'm looking at Sony's newest and coolest and greatest full frame options like the A7R III, in the back of my mind I'm wondering if I would, you know, love just as much a 5D Mark IV, a 1DX Mark II, or a 5DSR. Here's what I'm poorly trying to get at. I don't think that Canon's been raising the bar. Canon hasn't been pushing the imaging industry forward since the 5D Mark II. Canon hasn't been making products that make me wonder how I could use them to be more creative. They haven't been empowering me to be more creative. Although all of that is true, Canon is the standard. Canon is the standard by which we'll be judging the rest of the entire photographic industry, their cameras, their lenses, their market segmentation, their pricing strategy, their value for dollar propositions. In my opinion, it's important to appreciate and respect what that means. Because without Canon, I wouldn't have been able to capture some of the moments that mean so much to me. I wouldn't have been able to make some of my most favorite images. And without Canon, I wouldn't be able to know just what exactly I'm looking for in the future out of an imaging device. Bodies, lenses, and the final results. That's all I got for you today. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention. Please check out those Amazon affiliate links in the description below. I do receive a small commission when you use them. It does not change the price. I also have my Etsy store and all that kind of stuff linked down below. But anyway, thank you very much for your time and for your attention. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one.